Hello, my friends. How you doing? Your buddy Phil here, project management trainer and coach, trying to answer questions from our students. For those of you who have written in, thank you very much. I appreciate you writing in and letting me know how your studying is going. It's okay if you've missed classes. Just make sure that you catch up. And to my students who have taken the PMBOK exam, that is pretty remarkable. I see your results and we just want to say more power to you. Now, we got some questions that came in from our friend Sean on the Facebook group, and I want to answer these really quickly. So the first one is project team assignments, physical resource assignments, both are about officially assigning resources and using the categories in the WBS. Is the project team assignment really just a document that further describes the RBS RACI in text format? Well, you could look at it that way, but the project team assignments beyond the document is the actual assignment of those individuals. So while it's in a document, it's the actual assignments we're referring to. Could you consider the project team assignments more official? Not really. The project team assignments are just that. It is the assignment of those individuals. So while we're used to seeing something tangible as an output, it is really the matter of fact that that has been assigned and that has been done. And if you will, as you said, formally considered, that person is now formally assigned. So while you might have some things that are hopeful in your resource breakdown structure, the actual assignment is just that. It's the actuality of the person being assigned, the people being assigned. The physical resources being assigned, though, I like to think about this differently because this is really more like you being guaranteed that place in the building is yours because it has been booked. That equipment is yours to use because it has been now physically assigned to the project, if you will. So that's really what it is. It's really the assignment, not necessarily the paperwork, but beyond the paperwork, it's the actuality of assignment. So it's a little bit intangible, but if you needed some tangibility, you could say, okay, it's paperwork. Okay? Would you record or update the risk owner and the risk action owner in the RACI, RAM, RBS? That would actually not be the place to update them for risk actions. The risk register will be the place to do that. But again, in the real world, anything happens. So if people want to do that in the real world and they feel it's a significant undertaking and they want to update it there, that's fine. But you would update the risk owner, the risk action owner, and all those folks. You would typically update those people in the risk register. The risk owner is accountable for the risk activity, owner's implementation of the risk response, and I know risk response and strategies would be reviewed in a risk meeting or workshop. Well, actually, the risk reviews, those would happen in monitor risks, but the risk strategy is crafted in plan risk management, and you should be reviewing this stuff all throughout the project. So while we bucketize it in monitor risk to check and make sure things are effective, we could actually do this all throughout the project. However, is a risk owner usually the person responsible for writing up the risk response plan or strategy? Could be. Very much so. So the RACI chart, I would not confuse, though, when it comes to risk. Personally, I would not mix and meld the risk responsibilities and such in a RACI. That would not be my place to do that. I would need to do that in a risk management plan. And if you check the PMBOK guide, in chapter 11, let's go to 11.1. I'll tell you where to look at because we talk about these things in the risk management plan. The RACI chart is more for the tasks being done to carry out the work, but things from a risk perspective, I like to think about that in a risk management plan. So if you go to page 405 and you look at the roles and responsibilities, the third bullet, it says, defines the lead, support, and risk management team members for each activity, for each type of activity described in the risk management plan, and clarifies their responsibility. So I would do that in the risk management plan. I'm not saying people can't decide to do it in the RACI, but having so many duplicate efforts is not advised. Next question, in the communications knowledge area, when communicating, how best to distinguish formal reports and official reports? Again, it's something that's very speculative. So formal reports, you could look at formal reports as things that need some formality before they are sent. Official reports, you would think of that as being something at a company level. So a formal report could be from you to, let's say, a customer. An official report could be to the world from a company. A company's report to the world about how they've performed in the past year or something to that extent. Again, we should also remember that we have project reports and we have non-project reports. So a lot of this is speculative. It's splitting hairs. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Next question, if you communicated a first offense to a team member, it would most likely be an informal email. Most likely, again, it depends on the firm, but as a project manager, that would probably be your first port of call. With the second offense, usually be a formal meeting. Again, it's very speculative. You see, the PMI does not give you cookie cutter answers as far as first time do this, second time do this. But one thing's for sure, in the real world, if someone commits the first offense and you give them a verbal warning, the second offense, it would make sense to put that into some sort of documentation, like an email. It could be an informal email. In some companies, it could be the HR department getting involved. It really depends. So I don't want to give you any cookie-cutter prescriptions. In the PMBOK lexicon, who would be considered the functional manager? Functional manager is usually someone who is not the project manager in charge of a department or business unit. Again, it differs from company to company. So if you just Google functional manager, for example, they will have their own definition of it. A functional manager in Wikipedia is a person who has management authority over an organizational unit, such as a department within a business, company, or other organization, which is exactly what I said. It's more like a business unit. The PMI does not have any prescriptive language for functional manager, but you kind of get the idea. It's a department or business unit. It's a function based off department role. That is correct. It is. Regression analysis is the next question. Used in closing versus document analysis. Now, these are very different. Regression analysis is looking as to why the project ended up as it did, whether success or failure. Document analysis can be used in, for example, analyzing to find problems in the documents that you have collected so far that could lead to risks. You could also look at a document analysis as being an analysis of business documents to glean requirements. Regression is the key word. Regression. How did we get to the point we are? So you want to look backwards, right? Backward steps. Look backwards. Trace your steps backwards. How did we get here? We succeeded. We did good. We did awesome. How did we get here? Versus, we did awful. How did we get here? See, both of those are regression analysis. All right, procurement documentation, bid documents, and so on. However, I wanted to confirm if procurement strategy would also be considered procurement documentation. Again, I don't think this is overwhelmingly important. I would not apply myself to cram this stuff, but I would say as you're reading through it, try to understand the flow and the logic. So there are two places that this is mentioned. If you go to control procurements and you take a look at the inputs, you see procurement documentation. And the PMI, I must say, a little bit disjointed in this presentation of information, but procurement documentation to them in 12.3.1.4 is the statement of work, payment information, contractor work performance information, plan, drawings, other correspondence. See? Now, if you go to the outputs of 12.1, you realize a lot of those outputs of 12.1 spuriously appear as procurement documents in conduct procurements. So if you go to conduct procurements, you see them mentioning explicitly can include 12.2.1.3, bid documents, procurement statement of work, independent cost estimate, source selection criteria. See that? They, however, do not talk about the procurement strategy, do they? As being a piece of it. So for that reason, what I would focus on in this particular process is what is the output of 12.2? And one of the outputs of 12.2, you'll find out that they mention procurement documentation updates. And let's see what that refers to. Actually, project, not procurement, I beg your pardon. Project documents updates. There's no procurement documentation updates in this one. But if you look under project documents updates, you do not see anything to the effect of the procurement strategy. Now, if you go to 12.3 again, which is where I believe this is, in the outputs, you will see procurement documentation updates. There we go. 12.3.3.3 on page 499. And what do they say? Procurement documentation that may be updated could includes the contract with all supporting schedules, requested unapproved contract changes, and approved change requests. Procurement documentation also includes any seller-developed technical documentation and other work performance information such as deliverables, seller performance reports, and warranties, financial documents, and so on. So you can see that the so-called procurement documentation is updated in control procurements but not conduct procurements, which just shows you that they're all over the place. So for the exam, what I would recommend that you do is just understand that the procurement strategy is definitely factored in to conduct procurements, but the PMI is silent on where this exactly is. My recommendation is to look at it as some sort of project document, unspoken project document, and just know that it is factored in to the mix and should be reviewed and updated if needed. That would be my recommendation. But don't split hairs over it. Just know what your procurement strategy is. Okay? The last question here is product scope versus project scope. If you're working on software, could you view the product scope as the individual modules, microservices? No. I would look at product scope as the features and functions that are needed. Okay? The features and functions that are needed. I guess you could say the features and functions that are needed, if you aggregate them, you could get the individual modules and microservices. So, to some degree, yes. But when we talk about product scope, it's important that we use the language the PMI is used to, which is features and functions. Features and functions. So, there are a number of places where you can infer the language for requirements. But let's just go to 5.2 really quick and let me point this out. 5.2, and let's take a look at page 148. So on page 148, it gives you all sorts of requirements. And under solution requirements, you have functional requirements. Functional requirements describe the behaviors of the product. Examples include actions, process, data, interaction, such and such. Then we have business requirements. These are the high-level needs of the organization. Also something to take note of. Then we have transition requirements, we have project requirements, we have quality requirements. But when we talk about product requirements, this is what you have in your requirements traceability matrix. So your requirements traceability matrix links product requirements from their origin to the deliverables that satisfy them and other places and stuff like that. So when you talk about a product requirement, it is important that you think about the features and functions of whatever product, service, or result you're looking to create. Okay? And then Product scope. Well, I talked about product requirements. Product scope is pretty much the same. Product scope, I guess you could say the individual microservices and modules. I guess you could. But I'm very careful when it comes to using words outside of the PMBOK guide to describe things. You know, that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to describe it as that. But from a standpoint of someone who knows what they're talking about, what you mean by individual modules of a system or software, yes, I guess you could say that. The next question, and you view project scope is the work you need to deliver the product scope. That's correct. Absolutely. No. So, Sean, the user training guides, that will be part of the product scope. The project scope would be the work you need to do to get those user training guides, the laminating, the binding, the production of all that stuff. That is project scope. You see, the product scope is actually the training guides as well. The training guides, the modules, the microservices, as you said, that's all product scope. But the project scope are the things you need to do, the raw work. Think about it like raw work, right? The raw work that you need to do, the programming, for example, the coding, all of that stuff that you need to do, the testing, that is part of the project scope because it's work. It's not a deliverable. It's work to get the deliverable, if you get what I'm saying. I hope this helped you. Take care, and bye for now.